This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We don't get many sports days better than today. Not only is it MLB opening day for today, but also it's the first day of the Sweet 16 of the men's college basketball tournament. Here to break down that is Aidan Cotter. We'll talk to Aidan today about his read on all four games for tonight. We'll talk some futures as well to get you ready for night number one of the Sweet 16. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research. Joined here, as mentioned, by Aidan Cotter. Check him out on Twitter at Aidan Cotter FD. Find his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a writer for us. Aidan, happy Sweet 16 to you. How you doing today?
Pretty good, Jim. Excited. We were talking a little bit before the show started. It seems like we have a lot of the favorites are still around. A lot of the top players in the game are still around. So it's going to be a fun couple days until decide the Final Four.
Yeah, I was checking my bracket and I have all of my Elite Eight teams still alive, and it's like that does not indicate anything about me. It says that we had a lot of favorites win over the weekend, which could be boring, but also I think that it just sets us up for really fun games where we're getting to watch like the best of the best kind of go at it. And personally, I love a good upset, but I think I'd rather skew that way, where I'd rather have a bit more chalk if it leads to more intriguing games later on in the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. I think just leads to having the best players in our sport kind of out there for the world to see, especially for people that really only tune into college basketball during March Madness. It's fun for them to get to experience some of what more diehards have been seeing all season. So it's fun.
That's me. I want that introduction, and we're going to get that for tonight. What we'll do for today with Aidan is break down all four games, get his read on them, outline where he sees value at FanDuel Sportsbook, and then we'll talk some futures with him as well before the Sweet 16 gets underway. We'll talk about Friday's games tomorrow with Riley Thomas right here in the same place to get his read on those. But if you want some thoughts on today's MLB slate, go check out yesterday's Covering the Spread with Tom Vecchio. Thank you to Tom and Austin Swain for filling in for me while I was gone earlier on this week. You can find Tom's read on the MLB opening day slate here on Covering the Spread, but also over on FanDuel Research Podcast, because the opening day solo shot is posted. We're doing props there as well. So we made the change with the daily ISO and the heat check, talk betting, and DFS. Doing the same with the solo shots. If you want some player props for Thursday's opening day games, check those out with Tom, along with some thoughts on DFS. Just search for FanDuel Research Podcast wherever you get your podcast. That, and of course, the Covering the Spread version here on Covering the Spread, and also over on FanDuel TV Plus. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, and Vermont. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit chaosgamblinghealth.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. You can also visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 1-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-70-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Aidan, we'll dig into Thursday's games here in just 1 second, but bit of an inflection point here. We've had the break to take a look at the futures market in the men's college basketball markets. And we've got a good read on the matchups, and you kind of know the path. So I want to ask you about what you think of the futures market right now. Any value you want to snag there before we get to tip off for tonight?
I don't love any of the outrights. There wasn't anything that really stuck out to me before the tournament started. And then with like we talked about, there's just been a lot of chalk. So there hasn't been a whole lot of movement on that front. For me, obviously, Yukon, Houston, and Purdue are the 3 teams I am most confident in to win the national championship, but that's also reflected in the odds. I think what I've started to look into a little bit, and if you wanted to get a future on one of those 3 teams at a little more value, is you can look at the Final 4 most outstanding player market. So the last 4 winners have been that team's leading scorer, and that's only happened in 6 out of the last 10 years. So it's not always that cut and dry, but there's still, you can get a little bit more value. And so I'll just throw a few names out for those teams. For Yukon, you'll see Klingon is like plus 600, plus 650. That's interesting. I think you get a little more value further down at Tristan Newton, who's their leading scorer. He's plus 1,100. He won the Big East tournament MVP. He's their leading scorer, their leading assist man. For Houston, their national championship odds are plus 550, but then their top player, Jamal Shed, he's down at plus 1,000 to win most outstanding player. He's their second leading scorer, but he's kind of like the heart and soul of their team. So he would be someone where if you're talking yourself into Houston winning the national championship, he would be probably the main reason why. And then obviously for Purdue, you're not seeing a whole lot of difference. So they're plus 550 to win the title.
Right.
He's plus 600 to win most outstanding player. So that's not a huge gap. But at the same time, like if you're willing to bet Purdue is going to win the title, that little bit of extra value is probably worth it given his enormous impact on the team. Just as kind of like a fun one, something we have seen once or twice in the last 10 years is you'll see a team's like secondary, tertiary option just get super hot for one of these 2 games. We saw it with like Ryan Arcidiacono on those really loaded Villanova teams, Luke Hancock on that Louisville team in 2014. So for Purdue, all the way down at plus 28,000, Lance Jones, who is their 3rd leading scorer. He hasn't been very good this month, but he was super hot at the beginning of the year. He was averaging over 15 points per game to start the season. And like I've said, we've seen guys get crazy hot in these 2-game samples. And for me to have someone who's a team's going to be their 2nd or 3rd leading scorer, even when he's not playing well, that odds is just kind of insane to me. And that is something where like, I'll throw $1 or $2 on that. Like just get a little bit of action on there.
Sure.
But other than that, there's not anything I'm really trying to dive into with the futures, but that I think is just kind of a fun one. If you're thinking, oh, maybe they'll focus in on Edey, like he'll have to kick it out and play through their guards and still win the national championship. So
that's Lance Jones, 280 to 1 to win the Final Four's most outstanding player. Plays a lot of minutes. He's out there, hasn't had to do a ton in the first 2 games because they've been blowouts effectively. And like you said, they're going to put a lot of attention on Zach Edey. And you know, most Purdue players are going to have length and odds as a result of the fact that they're saying that if Purdue does wind up winning it, 90% of the time it's going to be Zach Edey who winds up winning the most outstanding player. It's just like I'm curious how the voting works for this award, because there are some awards where it's like, you know, the people voting on it might just go with like the most obvious answer. I don't know. I don't want to disparage voters. But how does the like actual allocation of this award work? Is it people we can trust to kind of like actually give it to the guy who catalyzed the team to victory?
Yeah. So I believe it is media.
Okay.
And so, like I said, the last couple of years, they've been a little more chalky with their voting, kind of giving it to like their leading scorer and their best player.
Yeah.
But we have seen, especially with teams with a little more depth, and that's why you'll see Yukon has like 2 or 3 guys with shorter than plus 2,000 odds to win it. That they can get kind of sucked into these storylines. And once again, the important thing here is this is a Final Four most outstanding player. Right. So this is just the 2 games is what they're supposed to be looking at.
Right.
And, you know, take that with a grain of salt, especially with someone who's been as dominant as Edey. But like I'd mentioned, Ryan Arcidiacono on that Villanova team, like, they had Jalen Brunson, they had Miles Bridges, Mikal Bridges. They had a lot of really high-level scorers, guys who were competing for National Player of the Year. And then they had little Ryan Arcidiacono come out and light it up for 2 games and win it. So just kind of a fun one. But like I said, still probably a little more value just taking Edey compared to that 550.
Right. Yeah, the Patrick Mahomes kind of bet. The Patrick Mahomes MVP bet is Zach Edey 6 to 1 to win a Final Four most outstanding player, but maybe some value in Lance Jones 280 to 1 to win it as well. Let's talk about Thursday's games now, Aidan. Starting off with Clemson versus Arizona, the first game of the night. Right now, Arizona, 7.5-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. When you look at this one, any value stand out to you, Aidan?
This game is so tough because if you remember last week, I was really high on New Mexico, and they played Clemson in the first round. I had some New Mexico futures to make it the Elite Eight, make it the Final Four. Was all over them to beat Clemson. And I think I said exactly, New Mexico might run Clemson off the floor. And the exact opposite happened. Clemson ran New Mexico off the floor, dominated the pace. They couldn't miss from three. And I was like, okay, one off for Clemson, still not a believer. Now they're playing Baylor, who is like probably my second or third favorite team in this region. It's like Baylor won't have a problem. Definitely a closer game. Baylor made it tight towards the end, but Clemson still just came out ahead. Their guards have been playing super well. And I have the same kind of lean for this game where I want to take Arizona. I think the public is going to be really heavy on Arizona. And analytically, they match up so much better. Like Arizona, I think, has better national championship odds than North Carolina, who is the 1 seed in their region, Arizona being the 2. Like they are a very, very good and well-rounded team. But there's just something about this game where I can't really trust the Wildcats here. It's hard for me to trust Caleb Love. It's hard for me to trust an Arizona team that we saw them drop a couple of easier games during the Pac-12 schedule, whereas Clemson has been battle-tested in what now is looking to be like a pretty strong ACC. They have 4 teams in the Sweet 16. And Clemson, I think, didn't get a whole lot of hype coming in because kind of like Alabama, who we'll talk about later, they did not play well down the stretch. And I think you can kind of get caught in this trap where you buy into these late season runs and these late season conference pushes and fade the teams that falter down the stretch. And it's a little more important, I think, to take a step back, look at their overall body of work. And Clemson does a really good job playing slow. They play inside. And if they can dictate the pace against a team like Arizona, who likes to get up and down and likes to push, I think 7.5 is just too big of a number for me. I mean, Arizona, they beat my Dayton Flyers in the last round by, I believe, 12. They covered at the last second. It was a brutal cover. But they only did that, and Dayton shot 28% from 3 and is like one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country. And Long Beach State in the first round, the 15 seed, kind of hung around with them in the first half. Like, I haven't loved how Arizona's looked to kick off these first 2 games. And Clemson, I think, is just playing really well. They have good guards. They have a good big man who just hasn't had a good game in the tournament, and they've still been winning. And so the fact that they have been playing so well without their best player having a big game, I think really has me leaning towards taking that Clemson plus 7.5 in what should be a closer game, I think, than people will expect.
The plus 7.5 on Clemson right now is minus 118. I want to ask you how much stock you put into the opening 2 rounds, because obviously we're seeing teams in a pretty recent format. We're seeing them in a very recent setting. And so it's like probably our best sample on them, but it is also just 2 games thus far. So it sounds like here you're putting a lot of stock on what we've seen from Clemson and Arizona the first 2 rounds. How much does that drive you towards the lean towards Clemson plus 7.5?
Yeah, so it's kind of similar to what I was saying about us over-relying on end of the season conference tournament results. I don't want to get too sucked into how teams look in those first 2 rounds because, especially with this week gap between the 2 games where they have this time to rest and game plan for this 1 or 2 specific games, I think it is easier for me to get behind the higher seeded teams that play well. And this year, we don't really have a huge like Cinderella, like a 13 or 14 seed that made their way to the Sweet 16, where for me, that would be kind of more of an obvious fade because they kind of just got hot for 2 games and we know their overall body of work isn't as strong. Whereas Clemson, they are playing really well right now, but they also have that body of work from the regular season that we can draw from and say, okay, this isn't just like a one-off. We've seen them play well throughout the year. So it's kind of a combination of both. Especially a team like Clemson who has played a difficult schedule. They've played, like I said, in the ACC, which is proving to be actually a pretty decent conference. And so you kind of have to weigh those things just, I don't know, with their overall body of work.
Yeah, I think you got to weigh both, and that's what you're doing here. So Aidan is leaning towards Clemson plus 7.5 in the opening game against Arizona. Second game of the night is Yukon taking on San Diego State, and the spread has lengthened. It is now Yukon minus 11.5, and they've earned that. I want to thank Yukon because I stayed up to watch the Northwestern game in Scotland, and they allowed me to go to bed early because it started at 11:45 over there in Scotland. So thank you to Yukon for allowing me to go to bed. But now that's a big number, Aidan. So what's your read on this game here?
Man, this game is so hard for me because, like I said, I think Yukon is the best team in the country. I don't think it's a hot take at all. I'm confident they're going to win against San Diego State outright. They've been my title pick since January. This line is this is tough, man. Like you said, it's even grown to 11.5. It was 10.5 when I was prepping last night. And even that was pretty difficult for me to get there. If you remember Yukon, this is a national championship rematch from last year, and Yukon smoked them. Beat them by 17 last season. And they did that. They lost the turnover battle. They only made 6 threes and they still won cleared this line with ease. And obviously this is a different team. Like I would argue this is a better Yukon team than last year. And then this is a worse San Diego State team than last year. It's still hard for me to lay this 11.5 when you have both of these teams play at a slower pace. They're both very good defensive teams. I think that lends itself more towards the under is pretty interesting here. I think that would be how I would play this game, but it's so hard for me to do anything that's like fading this Yukon team is so hard for me because what we've seen from them is at the snap of their fingers, they can pop for 80, 90 points by themselves. And then this under is looking pretty stupid. So I think the under is still how I would play this game from a lines perspective. I might end up playing a prop here. I wrote up Tristan Newton, who is UConn's point guard. His points and assists line under the assist tab is 20.5. And I think that's interesting. He's been definitely their most reliable player of late. I don't know. This is a game I think I'm going to end up staying away from at the end of the day. Like I said, I love UConn. When you look a lot of the models, those like KenPom, Bart Torvik, Haslametrics, they're all like UConn -8, UConn -9. And I don't want to be on San Diego State here. But at the same time, like, I know you said you went to bed before the end of the Northwestern game, but they did. They almost sneaky backdoor covered there at the very end.
Yeah, I checked the score in the morning. I was like, okay, that's at least like somewhat respectable.
Right. And like you see that with these bigger lines. And so I think this is going to be a stay away from me. But if I had to have a lean, it would definitely be towards the under and towards Tristan Newton over points and assists.
Okay, so I think that your overall thesis here is that if this pace is slow, it's hard to cover a bigger number. One way you could, parlay those thoughts is by taking San Diego State plus 11.5 under 135.5. Now, those two bets are correlated, and FanDuel Sportsbook knows that. But you could at least consider that as a route potentially to looking at this game. Plus 244, the same game parlay there. So you're actually not paying a massive tax to parlay those two together. So if you want to go at the angle of San Diego State slows things down, try to get a higher variance game, you could decide to go that route too. But the Tristan Newton over 20.5 points plus assists, the other one that Aidan is potentially eyeing here for this game for tonight. Let's talk about the third game on Thursday. That is Alabama taking on UNC. 4.5 points spread here for this one. Total is 173.5. What are you seeing in this one, Aidan?
Yeah, so I think the nightcap is what I'm really excited about for today. The first two games are interesting. There's some stuff I'm looking for, but these two night games are going to be awesome. So North Carolina and Alabama, you'll see this total is absolutely absurd. 173.5 is just a crazy number for a college basketball game. And that's because both of these teams, they're top 20 in scoring. Alabama is actually the nation's leading scoring team. They average over 90 points per game. They're both top 20 in offensive efficiency. They're both top 50 in pace. And my initial lean was to take North Carolina. I was like kind of off Bama for kind of the same reasons with Clemson, where they came into the tournament a little, not playing their best ball. I think I do want to lay this 4.5 with North Carolina. It has moved up a little bit, even the last couple of days. I think a big thing to look out for with Alabama today is they do have kind of a key injury. Latrell Wrightsell, who's one of their starters, he's one of their guards. He's probably their best perimeter defender. He missed a couple games at the end of February with what they call a head injury. And then in the Grand Canyon game, he left in the first half with a similar head injury. And Nate Oates, their coach, had said, we're going to see how he looks on Thursday. He hasn't practiced this week. So I think especially if he's not out, I'm really concerned with how Alabama is going to slow down North Carolina, because Alabama's offense is electric and it's awesome. but so is North Carolina's. The difference is North Carolina is also top 10 in adjusted defense. They don't turn the ball over. They actually play defense, unlike Alabama. And the biggest thing for me is North Carolina does a great job getting the free throw line. And Alabama, not only are they not a good defensive team, they foul a lot. They struggle a lot to get out of foul trouble, especially inside. And so the more I've looked at this game, I think my favorite way to play is on FanDuel, you can do player to score 15 points plus team to win. So if you go to North Carolina to win and Armando Bacot to score 15 points, I had that at plus 135 last night. And for me, that is such a more comfortable way to play this game where I don't need to worry about North Carolina covering the spread. And I can kind of get in on this player prop that I'm really interested in because Alabama is not a good interior team. And Bacot has been a huge offensive threat in the last couple of games. He's cleared this line like 4 or 5 straight. He's taken on a lot heavier scoring load in the postseason. And so kind of what we talked about with the San Diego State line, where I'm correlating these two things where I think North Carolina is going to win. I think they're going to dominate the paint. And when they dominate the paint, that's going to be because they're playing through their best player and he's getting on the offensive glass and he's being super active getting to their free throw line. And so for me, that is my favorite way to play the game, especially getting it up to plus money.
Yeah, so it's now shortened. It's plus 120. I think you said plus 135 earlier on. That's for Armando Bacot to score 15 plus points and North Carolina to win. It's down to plus 120. Is that still value for you? And how much wiggle room is left for you to still feel okay about this bet?
I think so. I think if you're getting that at plus money, so Bacot's points, I had written it up earlier this week for FanDuel Research and it opened at 50.5 and is now moved to 16.5. So we're seeing people buying into Bacot's scoring prop.
Yeah.
At the same time, we've seen North Carolina move from 3.5 to 4.5, right? So both of these things are getting a little more action, a little more popular. And so I think as long as you're getting that at that plus number, I am pretty comfortable laying that.
Okay, so plus 120 right now for Bacot to score 15 plus points and for UNC to win for the Alabama versus UNC game. Final game of the night is Illinois taking on Iowa State in the tightest spread we've got on the board here, as it is Iowa State minus 1.5 taking on Illinois. So super tight spread here, Aidan. What are you seeing for this one?
Man, like purely as like a basketball fan, this is the game I'm most excited about. So like in one corner with Illinois, you have the 3 seed, the Big Ten tournament champs. And if you go on KenPom, they are the number 1 team in adjusted offense, right? They're coming off these huge 16, 26-point wins in the first 2 rounds. Haven't really been tested. They can absolutely score. Like all 5 of their starters are over 6'6". They're just big. They all can kind of handle the ball. They do a great job. They play more of a pro style offense where they really look for these mismatches where they can attack with their 2 main playmakers, Terrence Shannon and Marcus Damask. They can score from all 3 levels of the floor. They can get up and down. They can play in the half court. Like this Illinois team is insane on offense. And then you have Iowa State, who Big 12 tournament champs, and they're the number 1 defense on KenPom. And this is something I think in the last 10 years, this has only happened like 9 times where we've had the number 1 KenPom offense play the number 1 KenPom defense. So it's like,
but has it happened in the Sweet 16? That seems like really early for this kind of thing to happen.
Oh yeah. Like it's such a fascinating matchup for me, especially like Iowa State does such a good job. They just wreak so much havoc on defense. They love to like force turnovers and double and pressure. And like we saw them hold Houston to 41 points in the Big 12 championship. Houston scored like 90 in the second round. Like, and they're one of the best teams in the country. Like Iowa State has been the best defense in the country for months now. And then Illinois has been the best offense in the country. I can't pass up getting the better offense at plus 100. Like, I know I said they're the number 1 offense on KenPom. I think that kind of like undersells how good their offense has been. So like not only ranking wise in the number 1 offense, so their offensive rating is 126.8. That's the highest number KenPom has recorded since that Villanova 2018 team with Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, that just tore people up. You know, that Villanova team had a better defense, so it's not the same level of dominance, and that's why I'm not really interested in them as a national championship future. But just to say, like, this offense they're doing things that we haven't seen in like 6 or 7 years. I think their style of play is just going to be really tough for Iowa State. And I think the old school way of thinking is like defense wins championships. And I think there's definitely a lot of truth to that. But I think in individual matchups, especially like you said, in the Sweet 16, it's really hard for me to not lean towards the offense. Like I said, they have these two guys, Terrence Shannon and Marcus Damask, who have they're huge. They're like 6'6", like 220, like these big built guys. They're upperclassmen. They've been in these kind of bigger games. Shannon is on an absolute tear right now. He's averaging close to 27 points per game over the last 2 months. But for me, like Damask is really kind of their key. He has just thrived over the second half of the year as like their main distributor. And so I'm also interested in his assist prop. So the last 4 games, he had a triple-double in the first round against Morehead State. He had 7 assists against Duquesne last round. And then the Big Ten championship, I think he ended them with back-to-back 8 assist games. And it's at 4.5. And that is just such a crazy line for me, considering how Iowa State plays defense, where they're constantly doubling and pressuring. And that has led to them having one of the highest opponent assist rates in the country. And we see that with a team like Houston also has a defense like that, where, yeah, they have great defensive metrics, but they also do give up a lot of open shots because they're putting so much pressure and they're doubling. And Damask in Illinois, they do this. They call their offense, they call it booty ball. So it's really just Damask just backing down defenders. And because he's 6'6" and he's a good passer, he can kind of see over these guys. And I'm just very concerned with how Iowa State is going to guard him because he's such a good passer and scorer. I think they're going to struggle to force turnovers here. And I think Illinois, both teams are able to play up and down and play in the half court. So I'm not really concerned with like Iowa State being able to dictate the tempo and control the game. I don't think Iowa State is going to be able to do enough on offense to hang with Illinois. And as long as Illinois is hitting shots, they don't even have to be going crazy from 3. But as long as they're hitting shots, I think they're going to be okay here. And I love getting them as an underdog, like I said, given that they have this explosive offense.
So the 2 bets you mentioned there, the Illinois money line, even money, and then Marcus Damask over 4.5 assists. That is minus 106. Now, if you parlay those together, the correlation is baked in. That's only plus 228. So FanDuel, again, knows that those 2 bets are correlated. If I had to ask you, though, Aidan, if you wanted to pick between the Damask assist prop and the Illinois money line, which of those 2 bets do you prefer individually?
I think I want to take the Damask assist prop by itself, only because I think whether they win or lose, he is going to be such a big part of the game plan. And is there a world where Iowa State just gets hot from 3 and they win 85-82? Sure. I don't think there's a world where Iowa State completely shuts down Illinois' offense. And so I think that makes the Damask assist prop a little more enticing. Like I said, I am definitely on the Illini here, and I think this is going to be my favorite game on the slate.
All right, so Illinois, even money on the money line, but preference for the Marcus Damask over 4.5 assist prop minus 106 if you have access to that one as well. But it's going to be a fun night of basketball for sure. That is Aidan Cotter. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at Aidan Cotter FD. Find his work over at FanDuel Research. Aidan, a delight to have you on the show for today. Good luck to you tonight. Enjoy the basketball. We'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jim. Enjoy the games.
I will, very much so. That is all we have here for today. As mentioned, we are back once again tomorrow talking to Riley Thomas about Friday's games in the men's Sweet 16. Might talk some Saturday games as well with those matchups being set there. Check that out by subscribing to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. You can find me on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research as well. And don't forget that the MLB opening day podcasts are up via Tom Vecchio, both on Covering the Spread and over on the FanDuel Research podcast feed. Want to thank you all for tuning in. Good luck tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.